Welcome back to News in Focus. Of course, with this week being Week for Palestine, we are, of course, speaking to various stakeholders from across the country and overseas with regards to the solidarity for Palestine. Now, on Saturday, during the March for Palestine, which was arranged by the Al-Quds Foundation, a student by the name of Malaika Ngwenya gave a rousing speech which has not just gone viral, but it has sent a sense of inspiration to many youth who want to continue its solidarity with Palestine. And Malaika joins us now via Zoom. Malaika, good day. Thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV.
Thank you so much for such an exciting introduction.
No,
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this
no, it's an
opportunity.
absolute pleasure. Malaika, I'm sure your voice has recovered. I can hear that right now.
Slightly.
The thought process into you having this solidarity, were you born amongst it with your family, or did you have to learn about it? Talk to us about it and why this is important for you to have the solidarity.
I think it's just a responsibility that's innate. Just knowing that my family were under the apartheid regime and my grandma, she has, the trauma of apartheid. It's something that's built into me. And I want to push the status quo to ensure that that never happens again and that those things are rectified in South Africa and just globally. So it's definitely something innate. Yeah.
Malaika, let's talk about universities. There have been a few universities in South Africa who've divested from Israel. I know in Cape Town, Stellenbosch UCT, it's a challenge. Of course, you alongside many other bodies are slowly starting to get there. Why is it so difficult for any university within the Western Cape really to divest itself from Israel, given its influence amongst many other universities across the world?
I think it's a very interesting thing because you would assume that in South Africa this would be an easier process, right? Because of our history. But I think with universities, it's this thing of economics, finance. I think everything is driven by money and, making those who fund the institutions happy. And so as soon as you start saying free Palestine and adopting a very anti-apartheid, anti-genocide stance, it means you're going to be touching someone's pockets. And they would rather choose sort of the silence and the neutrality than to risk, burning bridges with the wrong people. And I think in the Western Cape, we're seeing that a lot. Yeah.
Malaika, how much are you inspired by what you're seeing in the United States of America right now, whether it's Harvard, Columbia, various Ivy League universities in the United States? What you've seen with Mahmoud Khalil, of course, he's still in detention by the ICE of the United States of America. So just how much of inspiration do you take from what is happening in the US and draw it with the parallels of South Africa?
I mean, I think from what I've seen from Columbia University and just all of these universities, it's definitely sparked so much, like a sense of responsibility to join in with my fellow students. And just the fearlessness is something that's inspired me. They are willing to go and push the boundaries as far as possible, even if it means risking, their future or their education, just for the sake of everyone deserves a fair chance at this life. And yeah, that's definitely been inspiring. And just the creative ways they do things, the encampments is something that I've just been just on a strategy point of view, it's amazing. And I think a lot of us in South Africa have taken a lot of inspiration from what they're doing in the States, especially because the consequences in the States are very bad. They're very intense.
Yeah.
So
I think, when you look at, of course, the crackdown by Donald Trump, I think it makes it much more difficult for them to go ahead and do these protests, even though they have a constitution and a democracy. Talking of constitution and democracy, how much of a youth role, given that we have these civil liberties to protect us in this country, how much do you use that to not just raise awareness, but to make sure that there is much more public participation in the understanding of the genocide that is happening in Gaza, the illegal occupation of the West Bank, and using these voices to really bring about the necessary change, but most importantly, the necessary education?
I think that's a very good question because everything boils down to policy and law. I think law has been used as the greatest tool for oppression. We look at international law and how it's supposed to be enforceable, but it's not. We look at our apartheid, and the one tool was, the legislation that made it easy to commit these crimes. And so making the law accessible to students and young people is very important so that they know also their rights in the context of South Africa, that they know that you can speak out, you can protest, you can encourage activism. And then also making it a stark contrast to what students and young people in Gaza and Palestine cannot do. And just that stark difference will show that no, there's something fundamentally wrong happening in Palestine and against Palestinians and against our peers, right? And I think as soon as you start comparing things and drawing parallels, it definitely sparks more interest and it personalizes the story and it makes it seem like, okay, no, we have a responsibility here. So the law has always been something, I'm a law student, so it's always been something that is used as a tool. And I think we can reclaim that, and we can use that to advantage.
Malaika, I asked you of inspiration in the previous question. How inspired are you by seeing the child taking a rock against the billions of US dollars in tanks by the IOF, the young children of Gaza who, as we speak right now, are in a state of famine. There's no food there. There's complete hunger. How do you get that inspiration? Of course, you're not in their shoes, but when you look at them and you say, well, this can't happen, not in the world that I'm living in right now.
It's that reminder that we cannot stop. We actually cannot stop because we're seeing children have to be strong in very abnormal circumstances. We're seeing children who have to have this sense of resilience and just keep going. And that should never be the case, right? They don't have an access to a childhood. And as someone who is young and a part of the youth, it's not even just that it's my responsibility. It's a thing of this can never, ever be okay. It can never be normalized. We can never see this as just something happening somewhere in the world. I think it's so interesting that with children, that hasn't tapped everyone yet. And it's such a scary thing because you would think children would unite people. You would see that a child is going through something that's so abnormal, you would unite people. And we're not seeing that enough. And I'm hoping that as people get onto the bandwagon, that changes. But yeah, seeing a child resist, I mean, something that I've seen in Gaza is just this element of, resistance and just continuation. And it's seen in children, and that's powerful, and it's definitely inspiring.
Malaika, South Africa went through these decades of apartheid, and of course the parallels between South Africa and Palestine are quite close when it comes to that. There were many student organizations which were pro the National Party. As we speak right now, there are many students organizations that are pro-Israeli. For yourself to try and get through to them, to give them the understanding of what is happening in Palestine, the destruction that is happening there, the apartheid, the genocide that is happening there. Is that a challenge that you relish? If it's a challenge that you relish, how do you get through to them, given that their mind is already made? They feel there's normality within Israel. They feel that this genocide is just a normal process of how things are supposed to be. Talk to us about that, and how important is it that this education is maintained, and maintained in a way that sooner or later it will get through to these various individuals?
I think it's gotten to a point where if someone doesn't see this as a problem and as something of urgency, it gets to a point where you have to step back and realize that you can only do so much. Right. I think in the conversations that I've had with people who tend to be pro-Israeli, what I've tried to do is just tackle the humanity of the situation. So when you go into like international law and all of these large concepts, they're often very good at challenging that. But when you go into just the humanity of, okay, but should so many children die? Is it ever justifiable for so many children to die, for so many women, so many elderly people? And as soon as you make it sort of emotional and human, I've been able to win a few people, just a few. But in general, it's that recognition of, you know what, as long as these are not the people in the spaces of power that make decisions that are really fundamental, you need to realize that you need to work with the people you have.
Sure.
And that's strong enough.
Malaika, thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.
That's Malaika Ngwenya. She is part of Student Action for Palestine. If you haven't seen her speech on Saturday, it's available on all our social media platforms on Hilaal TV. A really riveting speech, a rousing speech, and an inspiring one. We're going to be staying in Cape Town. The anti-corruption conference is currently happening there. I'm going to be speaking to Karam Singh, who is a consultant for Corruption Watch. Do stay tuned.